Has anyone ever been abandoned by their own parents in a foreign country without a single goodbye? I have. And the cruelest part was, they didn't just disappear. They erased me from their lives, as if I had never existed. My name was gone from the insurance, no return ticket, not even a single message left behind. Just one cold piece of paper. You're 17 now, old enough to survive. I still remember the day everything fell apart, a sunny morning in Venice, Italy. My name is Emma, the only daughter of a middle-class family from Michigan. I had just turned 17 a few weeks before the trip. My parents, Greg and Monica, said it was a healing vacation after my terrible academic year. And they were right. I wasn't okay. I had dropped out of school, gotten into fights, and had been suspended for 3 days after throwing a book at a window. But I was just a kid, desperate and confused about everything I couldn't understand. I thought, maybe they were trying to reconnect. Maybe they still loved me. When my mom suddenly handed me a plane ticket to Venice, a place I'd only ever seen on postcards, I nearly cried with hope. No cousins, no work calls from Dad, no interruptions. Just the three of us. A family. The first few days felt strange. We strolled by the canals, ate gelato every afternoon, and took photos at Piazza San Marco. I started smiling again. Not the forced kind, but real smiles. I still remember that morning, the 6th day of the trip. We had breakfast at the hotel. My mom wore brick red lipstick, the one she saved for special occasions. My dad was his usual silent self, sipping black coffee and reading the paper like nothing unusual was happening. As I was texting my best friend back home, my mom gently touched my hand and smiled. We're just going to the souvenir shop, stay in the room, we'll be back in 15 minutes. I nodded, not suspecting a thing. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. Then an hour. 2 hours. I started to worry, but tried to stay calm. Then the hotel staff said, "The couple in room 407 checked out this morning." My mind went blank. I ran to the room, empty. My luggage was gone. My passport, gone. Even my backpack, the one I carried everywhere, even to public restrooms, vanished. My phone had died earlier that day, and when I plugged it in, every call I made to Mom and Dad went to voicemail. My texts didn't send. No one replied. I sat in the lobby, waiting until nightfall, hoping they'd come back. No one did. The next day I went to the U.S. Embassy. A woman in a navy blazer with her hair neatly tied up, tapped on a keyboard, and finally looked at me. "You're no longer listed on their health insurance. Your return flight has been cancelled. You're also no longer on their emergency contact forms." I just sat there, numb. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had erased everything about me. That night, I returned to the hotel and curled up next to a trash bin outside a cafe. Cold wind hit my neck, and my heart pounded in chaos. I reached into my coat pocket, the only thing I still had, and found a small folded note. My mother's handwriting, neat, cold. "You're 17, old enough to survive." No explanation, just a sentence that felt like a final verdict, ending my life as their daughter. I didn't cry much. I had run out of tears from growing up too soon. I just curled up, my back against a stone wall, watching people laugh inside the warm restaurant across the street. A family singing happy birthday. A couple holding hands. And me. The girl left behind by the world. I had nowhere to go, no friends, no money, no identity, no one looking for me, no one needing me. And I swore, if I made it through that first night, no one would ever have the right to discard me again. I thought I was strong. I thought willpower alone would keep me alive. But reality is far from what books teach you. Willpower doesn't stop the hunger after 3 days of drinking tap water and picking up breadcrumbs from park benches. Venice is brutally beautiful. The slick cobblestone streets leave no room for the lost. The sun blazes during the day, but the nights are bone-chilling. I curled up by the back wall of that same cafe, staring at the warm lights and laughter spilling out on the night I was abandoned. But that light wasn't meant for me. I slept behind a closed-down market stall. It had a roof to block the dew, but not the cold that pierced through my torn coat. Every morning, I woke to delivery trucks roaring and footsteps rushing by, like I was just another invisible crack in the wall. By the fourth day, I couldn't take it anymore. My stomach cramped, my throat was dry, and my head spun so badly I couldn't tell reality from illusion. I stumbled through narrow alleys, grabbing onto the walls to stay upright. That's when I saw the bread. It sat on a metal tray outside a tiny shop. The crust was still warm, giving off the scent of freshly baked dough that nearly brought tears to my eyes. No one was around, no camera, just a loaf of bread, and a starving girl. I didn't think, I just acted. My hand shot out, pure survival instinct. But just as my fingers brushed the crisp crust, another hand grabbed my wrist. I froze. Not out of fear of being hit, but because this might be the end. I could be arrested, deported back to the US, or worse, fall into the hands of people I never wanted to name. The woman standing in front of me didn't say a word. She didn't yell. She didn't ask questions. She just looked at me, with gray-brown eyes like Tuscan stone, glowing against her tan skin and silver-streaked hair, tied back with a flour-dusted apron string. "Hungry?" she asked, her voice laced with a heavy Italian accent. I nodded, tears spilling out. "If you're hungry, then work," she said, and walked inside. I stood there, frozen, unsure if I had heard her right. She didn't shut the door, didn't tell me to leave. And I followed, like a lost soul finding the first exit after days in a maze. Her name was Angela. 62. Italian-American. She had lived in Venice for over 40 years. That little bakery was hers. Tucked on a quiet corner, where locals stopped each morning for bread, almond cake and coffee with milk. She led me to the back, to the dishwashing area. No name asked, no documents needed. "Gloves on, watch the knife, don't spill water on the floor." Her voice was as cold as raw flour, but not cruel. I nodded. Washed trays, dried glasses. When I was done, she pointed to the storage room. "Blanket there, old mattress there, sleep. Don't cause trouble." I nearly collapsed from relief. That night, I finally slept after 4 long nights. No fear of being chased away. No fear of someone stealing what little I had. I hugged the thin wool blanket tightly, the smell of flour and sugar lingering in the air. The next morning I worked again. Washed dishes, mopped floors, carried sacks of flour so heavy my back ached. Angela never smiled, but when I clumsily placed the bread on trays without breaking a single one, she nodded once. And to me, that nod meant more than any compliment I'd ever received. The days that followed, I gradually got used to the rhythm of the bakery. Angela never asked about my family. Never asked why I was wandering here. But I knew. She understood. Because once, as I quietly wiped down the counter in the evening, she looked at my hands, swollen and red from the cold water, and said softly, "My daughter used to have hands like that, slim fingers, short nails, always covered in flour." I stayed silent. Didn't ask more. And she didn't say anything else. But from that day on, every night, she left a small loaf of bread, slightly burnt on the edges, not very pretty, wrapped in brown paper on my mattress. A silent message: "I see you. You deserve to exist." I was no longer the girl abandoned by her parents. I was the one who washed dishes at the bakery, who carried flour, cleaned the stove, and opened the counter every morning. And amid the hunger and cold, I started to feel just a bit more human. I still didn't know where I would go, whether the future had a place for me. But I knew. This place, this bakery, and the woman with the stone gaze. This was where I began learning how to live again. I started each new day with the smell of yeast, and the sound of a metal knife slicing through soft dough. No alarm clock, no reminders, just the sound of Angela's heavy footsteps echoing at 4:30 a.m. like clockwork. At first I did small tasks, washing trays, mopping the floor, picking up flower wrappers from the ground. Angela rarely spoke, only signaled with her eyes and subtle nods. But I learned to read every glance, every faint curl of her lips, a silent language I slowly grew familiar with. A week later she handed me a ball of dough about the size of my fist and said, "Knead it. Don't let it fight back." I didn't understand, just followed instinct. Pressing, pushing, rolling. The dough was soft and sticky, slipping through my fingers like it was trying to escape my weak grip. But I kept going, over and over, until my shoulders ached and my hands stiffened like wood. Angela watched me. She didn't praise me. But that night on my old mattress, I found an extra pillow. Not new, but clean. I understood. That was her way of saying, "You've taken another step." I never asked her why she helped me, and she never asked, "Where are your parents?" I knew she knew. The signs were too obvious. The dark circles under my eyes, the clothes I wore day after day, the way I flinched whenever someone raised their voice in the shop. But she left me be. Let me just be me. No confessions. No performance. And in that silence I found my first sense of stability since being left behind. I learned how to crack eggs with one hand, how to slice pastry dough into perfect circles. I learned to set the oven's temperature without looking at the dial, just by smelling when the yeast was ready. I learned not to drop even a single piece of dough, even when my hands were wet and the floor was slick. Every mistake earned me a sharp glance from Angela, but every time I got it right, her eyes softened, if only for a split second. One evening, as I quietly wiped the kitchen after closing, Angela stood by the window with a glass of cheap red wine in her hand. Without turning around, she said, "Your hands don't shake when you cut dough anymore." I froze. Then smiled. No reply needed. After that she let me start working the morning counter, serving customers their pastries and coffee. I learned Italian through their rushed orders. Un cappuccino, per favore. Du panini, Lanza olive. I didn't talk much, but I listened more than I thought I could, and I remembered. Every regular customer, every way they nodded or winked when I got their order just right. Angela began giving me more responsibilities. Mixing almond cake batter, checking the oven's steam valve, writing down orders for nearby restaurants. Slowly, I was no longer the strange girl sleeping behind the storage room, but Emma, the one who helps Angela every morning. One day she handed me a batch of baguettes. For the first time, I baked something entirely on my own. I stood in front of the oven, gripping the heavy metal handle, my heart pounding as loudly as the fan whirring inside. The oven door opened, and the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air like I had just created an entirely new world. Angela looked at the tray, said nothing, but she picked up one loaf, broke it in half, and handed me a piece. It was the highest compliment I'd ever received. She wasn't a warm person. She didn't stroke my hair or ask if I was okay. But she gave me slippers for the winter. She gave me an old sweater that no longer fit her. And once, when I was curled up with a fever on the mattress, she placed a bowl of hot soup on the table, without a word. Though there were no hugs, no "Emma, are you all right?" Angela gave me a quiet kind of love. A kind I never had from my birth parents. I began to see myself differently. I no longer counted the days I survived. I counted batches of bread. I counted how many times I could knead dough without closing my eyes. I counted Angela's rare nods, and I remembered each one like invisible badges of honor. One night, while I was cleaning the oven, Angela looked at me and asked, very softly, "Are you planning to leave here?" I looked up, unsure how to answer. "Not now, but someday." I stayed silent, then nodded. "Someday. When I'm ready." She nodded back, gently. "When that day comes, you'll know how to be ready, because your hands don't shake anymore." The laptop I found was buried in a trash pile behind an old electronics store. The screen was cracked, 2 keys were missing, and the outer shell was covered in dust and duct tape. But when I pressed the power button for the 10th time, it let out a faint beep, like the fragile breath of something not ready to die. I held it like a treasure and ran straight back to the bakery, heart pounding. Angela looked at me and raised an eyebrow. Digging through trash again? I just smiled. As long as it powers on, it's enough. I cleaned out the small corner behind the storage room where I usually slept, set the laptop on an old wooden shelf, and began tinkering. No guidance, no fancy tools. I collected broken parts from a repair shop 2 blocks away. Every night after my shift, I sat for hours, disassembling, reassembling, sanding rusted circuits, taping wires back together with old tape. A week later, the laptop lit up again. Weak, slow, hot enough to cook an egg when playing a video, but alive. And to me, it was a whole world. I connected to the cafe's public Wi-Fi nearby and opened a prehistoric web browser to access a free GED learning site. I signed up for my first course, Basic Algebra. Each night, after scrubbing the kitchen spotless, I sat with my knees tucked by the humming fridge, opened the laptop and started learning. The British instructor's voice played steadily, teaching me things I once ran from in high school: equations, functions, square roots. For the first time in my life, I was learning for me. Not for a grade, not for someone else's expectations. I scribbled notes on old pastry box lids, sketched diagrams on napkins, and whispered answers like reciting prayers. Every time I got a test question right, I muttered the score under my breath, as if granting myself a blessing. One night, I stumbled across a business magazine someone had left behind on the customer table. A headline caught my eye: Future Blue Shipping, Global Restructuring Plan. The company name meant nothing to me, but the way they were downsizing and consolidating shipments to strategic ports grabbed my attention. I started researching more at turtle speed internet. Article by article. Forgotten investor forums. Half-loaded videos. 2 weeks later, I did the riskiest thing I'd ever done. I took the €170.00 I had saved from the wages Angela paid me and invested in Future Blue stock. My hands trembled as I hit the confirm button. Half of me thought I was insane. The other half hoped. The stock price rose after 4 days. It doubled in 2 weeks. I stared at my account. €340.00 glowing back at me. Tears falling, unsure if from fear or joy. I began digging deeper. Downloading PDF books from obscure websites, scribbling notes on the backs of pastry order sheets. I read English translations of The Intelligent Investor, Principles, and Warren Buffett's speeches. I didn't just read, I studied. I handwrote every line, memorized financial models like they were keys to understanding the world. One night, Angela caught me with the laptop. "Doing accounting now?" she teased, gently. I shrugged. "Just learning a little." She didn't ask more. But from that night on, every time I studied, she quietly brought me a cup of peppermint tea, setting it beside me without a word. I opened accounts on small trading platforms, took free advice from anonymous finance forums. I learned to allocate capital, read charts, analyze trends. Not every trade was a win. Once I lost €80.00 because I believed a Reddit rumor. But I logged that mistake, pinned it on the wall above my bed, so I'd never forget. I slowly realized I didn't just want to survive, I wanted control over my life. I didn't want to wash dishes or scrub ovens forever. I wanted to own something, even something small. And from that old laptop I laid my first bricks. I created a simple blog, writing down basic investment knowledge in easy-to-understand language. No real name, no photo, just a pseudonym, E. Rivers. Readers began to appear. The first emails, unfamiliar thank yous, and even advice requests from strangers. I wasn't an expert, but I was honest. And maybe that's what made them believe in me. One evening, Angela handed me a small old tin box. It belonged to my husband, he used it for his ledgers. I looked at her, surprised. He was a... She nodded and smiled faintly. Accountant. Before he passed, he always said, if you know how to calculate, you'll know how to find your way. I hugged the box, speechless. I was still the girl sleeping behind a bakery, working with flour and yeast every day, but every night I was E. Rivers, someone sharing investment knowledge with hundreds of strangers. Between the scent of yeast, the hint of burnt coffee, and the crackle of baguettes in the oven, I learned. Success doesn't come from perfection, but from never stopping, never giving up. I never thought I'd start a company. I just wanted to survive, then to be useful, and then, one day, without even realizing when, I started building. From the anonymous E. Rivers blog, I expanded to simple spreadsheets, short videos explaining basic investing in plain English, for people like me. No papers, no background, no backing. No schools, no mentors, just a hunger for independence. My first client came from a comment on a post I wrote about cash flow in retail chains. I run a market stall in Verona, want to optimize my inventory, can you help? I spent 8 hours analyzing receipts they sent me through photos. Then I wrote a 3-step plan and created an inventory tracker in Excel. When they told me profits had gone up nearly 20%, I knew I could go further. I created a separate work account, named it ER Advisory, and listed services on a freelancer platform. No real name, no profile picture, just solutions. I built financial models, designed processes for small shops, and even consulted with American tourists looking to make small investments while traveling in Europe. No one asked about my credentials. No one knew I was only 19. No one needed to know I was once the girl abandoned in Venice with nothing but her hands. I began earning real money. Not floor mopping wages, but actual payments, through PayPal. Clean, transparent. Transferred from real businesses. And then, I used that income to do something I never thought I could. Give back. I started sending money to the US anonymously. Not to the old Michigan address, but to shelters for abandoned children, to support centers for homeless teens in states like Texas, New Jersey, and Florida. I didn't want them to know who sent it. I didn't need a thank you. I just wanted someone, like I once was, to have a warm enough blanket, a decent loaf of bread, or a chance to take an online class. Angela found out when she saw the wire transfer receipts taped to the wall by my bed. "Are you doing charity?" she asked, slightly surprised. I nodded. "Just a little, it's not much." She didn't say anything. Just quietly poured more tea and slid the cup toward me. From that night on, whenever I studied or worked late, she always left a plate of almond cookies beside me. As if she understood. I wasn't just living for myself anymore. Work began picking up. I started receiving more complex requests, restructuring cash flow for a bookstore, consulting on new product development for a natural cosmetics shop, and even creating a basic finance course for migrant workers. I built a simple website for ER Advisory, entirely in English, with a minimalist, no-frills layout, but complete. I didn't include a bio, I simply wrote, "I know what it feels like to be turned away. But that doesn't mean you can't succeed." One fall morning, I used part of a bonus from a large consulting project to buy Angela a new espresso machine, the kind with automatic milk frothing. She frowned at the shiny machine like it was an alien object. "This thing's expensive." I smiled. "The bakery deserves it." She gave a small nod, then poured a cappuccino using the new machine and silently handed it to me. "You've come a long way," she said. I gripped the cup tightly, feeling like her flour-dusted fingers had just touched my heart. I still lived in the tiny storage room behind the bakery, still woke up at 4:30 to knead dough. But now, alongside the oven's hum, was the clacking of my keyboard every night. I launched a separate advice channel for young people in Europe. Most of them stuck in between, without clear citizenship, without support. I taught them how to budget, how to open basic trading accounts, how to understand profits. All in the language of someone who'd once been at the very bottom, just like them. One night, I received an email from a nonprofit organization in New York. We'd like to invite you as a guest speaker at our Youth Financial Independence Summit. I nearly dropped the mouse, my heart raced out of control. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at the last line of the message. We don't know who you are, but you're changing the game. I had never thought of myself as someone who could change the game. I was just a girl who'd once been left behind in silence. But maybe it was that very silence that taught me how to listen. And because of that, I could hear those who'd never been heard. I began to feel a kind of power, not the kind that controls others, but the kind that comes from knowing I was no longer a burden. I had value, I created value, and I helped others see the value in themselves. One early morning in March, as I was mixing almond flour behind the counter, Angela sat at the breakfast table with her usual cup of black coffee and a stack of old newspapers someone had left behind. She wore her reading glasses, her silver hair tied low at the nape of her neck. The sunlight through the window lit her serious face, making her look like a living statue. I was just about to slide a tray into the oven when she spoke, without looking at me. Do you know the address 4286, Willow Creek Drive in Florida? I froze. My back stiffened, my heart slammed against my chest like someone had just punched me there. She calmly slid the paper toward me, her thin finger tapping a small box in the bottom corner. A short cold notice. Foreclosure. River State Bank announces auction of the property at 4286 Willow Creek Drive, Tallahassee, Florida, due to missed mortgage payments. I didn't need to read more. Just 3 words. Willow Creek Drive. That was the house my parents bought after abandoning me. The house they once bragged about online as the start of our new life. The place they built their lie around. Our daughter is studying abroad at a boarding school. They never once looked for me. Not a single call, not one apology. Just pictures, laughing with new friends, dinner parties on the patio, a beautifully decorated Christmas tree, while I was huddled next to a bakery oven, trying to stay warm. And now? That house was being foreclosed. And the universe, somehow, had placed that exact piece of news right into my hands. Angela remained seated, not pressuring me to answer. But I knew she could see the change in my eyes. I picked up the newspaper, folded it, and slipped it into my coat pocket. I need a ticket to Florida, I said, my voice raspy. Angela didn't ask why. Business trip? I nodded. Personal business. I didn't travel under the name Emma. I used the legal identity of the company, Advisory LLC, registered in Georgia, with E. Rivers, my carefully built and maintained name for the past 3 years, as the legal representative. The flight to Tallahassee took 13 hours, with 2 layovers. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that deep red door with the number 4286. The place that used to be home, but never a haven. The auction was held in an outdoor parking lot next to City Hall. I wore a navy blue shirt, oversized sunglasses, and had my hair pulled back. Angela stood next to me, wearing her old beige suit, wrinkled but straight like armor. No one looked at us for more than 5 seconds. To them I was just a young investor with a middle-aged assistant. The starting price was lower than I expected. A few people showed up, a chubby man in a plaid shirt, an older couple with calculating eyes. But I had already decided. I was going to buy it. Not for profit. Not as an investment, but because it was the first time I chose to confront the past, rather than let it chase me. The final bid ended with a sharp bang of the gavel. Sold to bidder number 119? Angela lowered the paddle, silent. I just stood there, hands in my coat pockets, eyes fixed on the old house in the distance. The one with the window where my mother used to hang white curtains. The entryway I hadn't walked through since I was 17. 3 days later, they received the official notice. Delivered by hand, the title deed was under ER Advisory. The eviction notice required them to vacate within 30 days. I didn't get a response right away, until a call came to the company email from their attorney's office. My clients would like to negotiate with the new owner. I agreed. I was good at negotiating through representatives. Cold, professional. The meeting was set in a small real estate office on the outskirts of town. Angela went with me. This time, as the property manager. I arrived 10 minutes early, wearing a black suit, hair in a tight bun, no makeup, no jewelry. Just sharp eyes and a steady breath. I didn't need them to recognize me right away. I needed them to lose control the moment I appeared. The door opened right on time. My mother entered first, still wearing the same middle-aged cardigan-style, oversized sunglasses trying to project fragility. My father followed, clutching a stack of papers, as if documents could save them from the truth. They didn't recognize me, not immediately. Not until I slowly removed my sunglasses. My mother's eyes froze. Her lips parted like the words were stuck in her throat. My father blinked rapidly, hands tightening around the wrinkled folder. I tilted my head slightly. "Hello?" No one answered. "This house is mine now." My mother stammered. "No, that can't be. This is..." I slid a copy of the title across the table. Angela stood beside me, her voice even, like a text-to-speech reader. "We'll need the keys within 30 days. The deadline will be communicated in writing." My mother began to cry. But this time, she wasn't the woman who could manipulate me with her tears. I looked at her like a blurry side character from an old memory. My father said nothing. I stood up. "I don't need an apology. And I don't need an explanation." I leaned in, voice like steel. "I just want you to know. The daughter you erased came back. And she's no longer a victim." I turned and walked away, leaving behind two people who once meant everything, now nothing more than fading shadows in my life. Angela followed without a word, but when we reached the car she placed a hand on my shoulder. Light. Just enough to let me know she was there. 3 days after the auction, their lawyer's office called again, with a gentle proposal. My clients would like to meet with the new owner to discuss a humane solution. Humane? How ironic. They left me curled up behind an old bakery, head resting on a sack of rain-soaked flour, and now they wanted to talk humane? Because they lost their house? I didn't refuse. I wanted to look them in the eyes. Not for revenge, but for closure. The meeting place was a small real estate office on the edge of town, quiet and unassuming. Angela came again, still in her role as legal representative. I wore a dark suit, tied-back hair, no makeup, no accessories. The less they could grasp onto, the more I controlled the moment they recognized me. I arrived 10 minutes early, sat calmly, hands folded on the table. I wanted them to see me like this. Composed, solid, completely in control. The door opened right on time. My mother entered first, still with her light-dyed hair, large sunglasses covering most of her face, a cream cardigan dress like every old photo I remembered. My father came in behind, walking slowly, clutching a worn-out folder. Like paperwork could rewrite reality. They sat down, still not realizing who I was, not right away. I removed my sunglasses. Each movement slow, like peeling away the last layer between me and them. My mother stared straight at me, and froze. Her eyes drained the color from her face in an instant. "Emma," she whispered. My father blinked rapidly, as if his mind couldn't keep up. His lips moved but no words came out. I sat still. No smile, no sympathy. "Long time no see." No one answered. I leaned back in my chair, fingers interlocked on the table. "You invited me here. I'm sitting here now. If you have something to say, say it." My mother started, her voice shaky but trying to sound gentle. "We just wanted to explain. Back then, we were exhausted, Emma. We were under so much stress. You wouldn't listen, you got into fights at school, you dropped out. We thought if we disappeared, you'd hate us less than if we forced you out." I laughed, a short, sharp sound like a knife slicing through fabric. "You call that a solution? leaving me in a foreign country with no money, no papers, not even a goodbye? She lowered her head, hands clenched together. We thought you'd come back. You're smart. You're strong. I tilted my head. I didn't come back. I was erased from every emergency contact, insurance, return flight, school email. Everything. I placed both hands on the table. That wasn't an accident, that was a plan. My father finally spoke, his voice hoarse and broken. Your mother thought it was for the best. I didn't ask what my mother thought. I cut in, my voice cold as steel. He looked at me, eyes dimming. I didn't stop it, I was wrong. His gaze dropped, as if those words weighed like a stone around his neck. I stood up, slowly walking to the edge of the table. I laid the copy of the property deed on the surface and pushed it toward them. I don't need your explanations, I don't need apologies. I just want you to understand one thing. I leaned in, eyes locked on theirs. I survived. I stood back up. On my own. And now, I'm the one who signed the foreclosure papers on the house you're living in. My mother began to cry, but this time, it wasn't the familiar sobs of a grieving mother. It was fragmented sniffling. An act that could no longer hide the truth. She tried to plead. Emma, you can't do this. We're family. I shook my head. No, you were my parents. But you chose to abandon that role. And I came back for one reason. Not because I need you, but so you would know that I came back. And I won. The room fell silent. Angela stepped forward, her voice sharp as a paper cutter. We'll email the transition plan. Any outstanding debts will be processed through the proper legal channels. My mother reached shakily for the file. My father didn't move. He just sat there, frozen, as if any motion would cause his entire world to collapse again. I walked out of the room without looking back. As my hand touched the door handle, my mother shouted behind me. Why, Emma? Why would you do this after everything? I stopped, but didn't turn around. Because I don't need you to heal the wound. I just need you to know I'm no longer buried under it. And I opened the door, walking out into the midday sun that shone through the glass. Bright, but no longer burning. I didn't return to that house right after the meeting. I needed time. Not to forgive, but to breathe. 1 week later, I held the keys and stepped into 4286 Willow Creek Drive. For the first time, as its legal owner. Everything inside looked exactly as I had once imagined it. Pale blue walls, the old rug under the coffee table, the crooked family photo frame behind the couch. None of the pictures included me. I stood in the living room, sunlight filtering through the curtains, dust floating in the air. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. This was the place they chose to continue life without me. Now, I would turn it into a beginning for others like me. I called Angela that same afternoon. I want to renovate everything, but not to live in. What do you want to do? She asked. A new home. For girls who'd been thrown away, lost, shut out by the world before they ever had a chance. Angela was silent for a moment, then she said, Then we'll call it Second Door. I hired a local repair crew, no lowballing, I wanted everything to be new, safe and warm. I asked them to remove everything that remained. Old furniture, stained rugs, broken wardrobe doors, even the smoke-stained kitchen curtain. I replaced them with light wood floors, thick cushioned chairs and blankets that smelled of fresh detergent. The master bedroom, the one my mother used to lock me out of, was turned into a shared space. 2 bunk beds, new bedding, a small bookshelf, and a corkboard. Each bed had a personal lockbox, for girls to store whatever belonged to them, even if it was a broken hair clip or an old birthday card. It mattered. The kitchen was expanded. I added a small industrial oven, a new fridge and a long wooden table. On the wall, I hung a chalkboard with white letters that read, You don't have to be perfect here. If you're still here, you're strong enough. When the house was finished, Angela and I started putting up flyers in small bakeries, local pharmacies, churches and youth centers. We didn't say, shelter. We didn't use the word, homeless. We simply wrote, second door, a place to begin again. No papers, no family? That's okay, we're still waiting for you. The first week no one came. The second week a girl around 16 knocked at dusk. She didn't say much, just asked, "Is there a place to sleep?" I nodded. "Yes, all we need is the name you'd like to be called." Her name was Rachel, curly hair, a bruise on her chin. I didn't ask who had done it. I just showed her the room, pointed to a bed and said, "Tomorrow morning if you want, I'll teach you how to crack eggs for flan." 3 days later 2 more girls arrived. One refused to take off her coat. One cried just seeing a warm bowl of noodles. Angela whispered to me, "Just let them breathe, the rest will come." We held baking lessons every Wednesday, optional, no pressure. Angela taught them how to knead dough, how to flip pastries without breaking them, how to count timing without a clock. I taught basic money skills. How to track spending, how to use a phone to look up financial info, how to avoid payday loans. No one had to talk about the past. No one was asked, "Where are your parents?" If they wanted to stay, that was reason enough to be welcomed. I was no longer Emma, the girl abandoned in Venice. I was the one who opened the window at midnight when a panicked girl knocked in the rain. I was the one who placed new socks in the laundry basket with a note, "They're yours. Don't be shy." I was the one standing in a brightly lit kitchen, wiping sweat from my forehead and smiling at the sound of laughter from the living room. One evening, Rachel, the first girl to find us, sat beside me on the porch after cleanup. She whispered, "I used to think no one needed me." I didn't turn to her. I simply replied, "I used to think that too." She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "If you found a home, does that mean I can too?" I nodded. Second door isn't your final home, it's just your beginning. In the soft glow of twilight, with the scent of baking drifting from the kitchen, I understood something. I didn't survive to get revenge. I survived to build. And from the ashes they left behind, I built something none of them ever imagined. A place where love had no strings, and home didn't require blood. I'm not afraid of the past anymore. Because now, I've turned it into the foundation for a future I can touch with my own hands and say, "I made this, with my own 2 hands." Emma's story isn't just about survival. It's a powerful testament that the past doesn't define the future. From a girl abandoned in a foreign land, Emma rose from pain, self-taught her way into a career, and transformed the very house that once symbolized rejection into a place of new beginnings for dozens of young women. She didn't seek revenge, she chose to give what she once didn't have: a chance. In a world full of wounds, sometimes it's the forgotten ones who shine the brightest. What do you think about Emma's journey? Could you forgive if you were in her shoes? Leave your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more moving stories about family and resilience.